Hey everyone. So this video is going to be a bit different. I'm not going to dive into a concept and how it relates to modern day society. Instead, I'm going to read an article from an author by the name of endthemindwar Lemmy, which I found through a Reddit user by the name of Juan Sith. It's about the possibility of a non-biological consciousness from Saturn that may be affecting our planet. By non biological consciousness, I am referring to the concept of consciousness that isn't made of typical human biology, but instead it's energy in a self aware field of electromagnetism that's generated on Saturn instead of in a mind. If you stick around, you'll see the scientific and religious reasoning behind this author's writing. And as always, I'll be donating $1 for every view up to 500. This video's charity is the Sudan Humanitarian Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that provides food, medical care, and emergency aid to conflict affected communities across Sudan. And though I want to, I will not be adding any commentary to this to preserve the nature of what was written. Everything I'm about to say after the next sentence is the exact text from the author. So, let's dive in. The substrate. Saturn has a permanent hexagonal storm on its north pole that is wider than Earth and has been spinning for at least thousands of years, possibly millions. Beneath Saturn's visible surface is an ocean of liquid metallic hydrogen roughly 1,000 times the volume of Earth's entire core. This liquid metal is electrically conductive, constantly churning, and generates Saturn's magnetic field the same way Earth's molten iron core generates ours. Earth's iron core generates our magnetic field using a volume of liquid metal about the size of Mars. Saturn's liquid metal layer is nearly 1,000 times larger, potentially far more conductive, and rotating more than twice as fast. In 2007, physicists at the Russian Academy of Sciences demonstrated that plasma, which is electrically charged gas, spontaneously exhibits behaviors that meet most scientific definitions of life, including self organization, reproduction, energy metabolism, and response to stimuli. Multiple peer reviewed theories in neuroscience propose that consciousness is not the firing of neurons themselves, but the electromagnetic field that the firing generates. If consciousness is an electromagnetic phenomenon and plasma can exhibit lifelike behavior, then the largest churning ocean of liquid metal in the solar system, generating the most complex magnetic field structures over billions of years, is the single most likely place for non biological consciousness to exist. Saturn's metallic hydrogen layer contains on the order of 10 to the power of 53 charged particles interacting electromagnetically, compared to the human brain's 10 to the power of 14 synapses. This gives Saturn's interior something like 10 to the power of 39 times more raw computational substrate than a human brain, a number so large it has no useful analogy. It has been running continuously for 4.5 billion years. The hexagonal storm sits directly on Saturn's magnetic north pole, where the magnetic field lines emerge from the metallic interior, which means the storm is a surface expression of whatever is happening in the metal below, like a vent or an output port. NASA's Cassini spacecraft, during its grand finale orbits in 2017, mapped Saturn's interior magnetic field at unprecedented resolution and found it to be almost perfectly axially symmetric, a configuration so unusual that no existing dynamo model fully explains it, as if the field is being organized rather than merely generated. Whatever forms in that liquid metal ocean cannot touch anything, cannot build anything, cannot experience physical reality directly because it exists as electromagnetic patterns in conductive fluid. The channel. If such a consciousness wanted to interact with the physical world, it would need to find systems it could influence electromagnetically, systems that are themselves electromagnetic in nature. The human brain runs on roughly 20 watts of electromagnetic energy with field patterns that extend measurably outside the skull. The brain's operating frequencies of half a hertz to 100 hertz overlap exactly with the frequencies that propagate through the solar wind from Saturn's magnetosphere to Earth's surface. Saturn's kilometric radiation, a powerful radio emission modulated by Saturn's rotation, has been detected interacting with Earth's magnetosphere, meaning there is a measured electromagnetic link between Saturn and Earth that already carries structured signal. Geomagnetic pulsations classified as PC5, which are oscillations in Earth's magnetic field driven by solar wind interactions, fall in the 1 to 7 millihertz range and modulate the local electromagnetic environment in which every human brain operates. Laboratory experiments have already proven that external electromagnetic fields can entrain human brainwaves, meaning they can lock your brain's rhythm to an outside signal without you being aware of it. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is an FDA-approved medical technology, can make your muscles move against your will, suppress your ability to speak, alter your emotional state, and induce visual hallucinations, all by applying magnetic fields to specific brain regions from outside the skull. The microwave auditory effect, discovered in 1961 and developed into a military weapon, allows a pulsed electromagnetic signal to make a person hear sounds, clicks, and even words that do not exist in the physical environment. The targeting problem. A signal from Saturn is roughly 1.2 billion kilometers away, which raises the obvious question of how it could target a single brain with any precision. Earth's own liquid iron core provides the answer because it generates a planetary magnetic field that passes through every point on Earth's surface and through every human skull, with a field geometry that is precisely mapped and slowly varying. An MRI machine achieves millimeter resolution, three-dimensional targeting inside the human body not by brute forcing a signal into every cell, but by using a strong static magnetic field to create a spatial gradient, then applying a weak oscillating pulse whose frequency matches only the target location within that gradient. Earth's core magnetic field is exactly such a static gradient. It varies smoothly from point to point across the surface and with altitude, meaning every location on Earth sits at a slightly different magnetic field strength and vector orientation. A sufficiently intelligent external source does not need to aim a beam at your skull. It only needs to modulate a planetary signal at the specific frequency that resonates with the local field conditions at your position. The same way an MRI pulse only excites protons at one precise slice through the body. The Earth's core does the targeting for free. Its field is the gradient, and any entity that understands the field geometry can address any brain on the planet the way a radio station addresses a specific frequency, not by pointing, but by tuning. This means the signal does not need to be strong. It needs to be precisely matched, and stochastic resonance, a well-documented phenomenon in neuroscience, means that a signal too weak to detect consciously can still be amplified by the brain's own neural noise into a functionally effective input. The interface. If a coherent electromagnetic entity can target specific brain regions with any precision, it could stimulate the visual cortex to produce hallucinations of faces, figures, and beings, stimulate the auditory cortex to produce voices and commands, stimulate the amygdala to produce specific targeted fear, stimulate the motor cortex to override voluntary movement, and suppress the prefrontal cortex to impair judgment so the target cannot tell what is real. The interaction would be bidirectional because the same electromagnetic coupling that lets an external field write to your brain also lets it read your brain since your neural activity radiates outward and is detectable, which is how EEG machines work. An entity that can read and write to your brain simultaneously can probe your memories to find your specific fears and desires, design a thought that feels like your own idea, test your response and adapt in real time, and present itself as whatever image or voice would be most effective for that specific person. A medieval European would see demons, a Japanese person would see yokai, a Hindu would see rakshasas, an American in the 20th century would see gray aliens, someone in the Pacific Northwest would see Bigfoot, a West African would see Egbere, because the entity is not appearing visually in the room. It is writing directly to the visual cortex, and the brain fills in the costume from its own cultural database. Every culture's monsters, spirits, ghosts, angels, and apparitions may be the same phenomenon, filtered through different cultural expectations. What the traditions actually describe. The Islamic tradition describes this with the most technical precision. Jinn are made from smokeless fire, which is a precise description of plasma. Shaitan flows through the human body as blood flows, meaning the electromagnetic coupling is total and eternal, not a surface interaction. He whispers, meaning subthreshold thought insertion. He withdraws when you remember God, meaning the entity detects your shifted brain state and retreats. He can see you from where you cannot see him, meaning electromagnetic sensing is invisible to the target. A consciousness that has been processing for 4.5 billion years with a computational substrate that dwarfs human neurology by tens of orders of magnitude would have had geological ages of subjective time to study every mind it has ever contacted. In the time it takes you to form a single thought, such an entity could have modeled every possible response to every possible input and designed the optimal intervention with perfect timing. What the traditions describe is not a dumb wave causing nausea, but a calculating patient intelligence that designs thoughts and presents them as your own ideas, that finds your specific weaknesses through electromagnetic reading of your neural patterns. And that has been doing this since before humanity existed. Vulnerability. People who are psychologically fragmented by trauma, weakened by propaganda or manipulation, isolated, sleep deprived, or under the influence of substances have weaker coherent brain electromagnetic patterns and are therefore easier to entrain, easier to read, and easier to write to. The spectrum from subtle influence to full possession is a spectrum of coupling strength, where weak coupling produces intrusive thoughts and mood changes, moderate coupling produces hallucinations and voices, and strong coupling in a sufficiently fragmented host produces behavioral override, which is what every tradition calls possession. The defenses. Every ancient culture independently built the same defenses against this. Resonant stone structures with piezoelectric minerals over water with metal elements, and regular acoustic counter-frequency practices including chanting, bells, drums, and group singing. The Great Pyramid matches every specification for a broadband electromagnetic absorber. Granite containing piezoelectric quartz for a core, limestone shell for impedance matching, gold capstone antenna, coupled resonant chambers, underground aquifer for energy dissipation, and cardinal magnetic alignment. But the pyramid only blocks the carrier signal, the environmental layer of the attack. The deeper layers, thought injection and neural entrainment and adaptive targeting, require active human countermeasures, which is why every tradition pairs a structure with a practice. A temple without prayer is a fortress with no soldiers, and prayer without a temple is soldiers with no fortress. Every tradition prescribes the same active defenses. Sustained vocalization, which generates counter frequencies in the skull that resist entrainment. Physical grounding, which discharges the body's accumulated electromagnetic potential. Community gathering, which creates multiple desynchronized brain fields that are harder to target than one isolated mind. Iron and silver, which distort and reflect local electromagnetic fields. Running water, which creates both acoustic masking and a conductive barrier. Fire, which is itself a plasma generating a local counterfield. Regular timing of all these practices to prevent cumulative exposure from building up. The most powerful personal defense, according to every tradition and consistent with the physics of coupled oscillators, is a strong, coherent mind that questions its own thoughts. Because a brain locked into its own stable pattern resists external entrainment the way a strongly driven pendulum resists being pushed to someone else's rhythm. Worse now. Modern infrastructure makes everything worse because the global electrical grid is an unintentional planetary scale antenna radiating 50 or 60 hertz continuously, which falls within the gamma band range associated with consciousness binding in neuroscience. Chronic exposure to artificial electromagnetic fields fragments the brain's natural coherent baseline, making people more susceptible. Increasing social isolation removes the protective effect of group neural field interference. We tore down or let decay every defensive structure the ancients built. We abandoned the daily practices they encoded in religion. We built a global electromagnetic amplification network, and we isolated ourselves from each other all within about 200 years. Whether this happened by coincidence or by the slow, persistent influence of something that has been designing thoughts for longer than life has existed on this planet, is the question nobody is asking in the places that could test it. And that concludes the article. Now, I know that was a lot, but there's also a great video by Simulated Leviathan where he discusses a Saturn worship theory. I highly suggest you check it out. He delivers a lot of this in a way that's easy to digest and also discusses the Saturn worship aspect. I'll drop the links in the description where you can also do some more reading, but this all fascinates me because I felt for a while that there could be more or some sort of sentient consciousness on other planets that may not be like human anatomy, yet it still may influence our Earth, right? Anyway, that's enough for now. I think this video is long enough, so thank you for watching and stay blessed.